sir. You're about to see something really special.
Really thought this part of my life was behind me. Frenzy disappeared with the drinking 3 years ago. Why now? This makes no sense, and I'm right on the verge of freaking out.
Back from your life.
These people can be animals.
What you burn.
Thingy's out.
Some bitter things you should never
Good cheese.
learn. Wallow through the days.
Remember, cosplay's not consent.
So here's to me. Congratulations, me. Yay, me.
This would all be so much easier if I was hammered. Hammered.
Won't be there anymore.
Right.
You can take away the anger, but you leave behind the pain. It's your soul I
New ventures are always scary.
feel till I'm melting
Blah, blah, blah. Something positive and uplifting.
tomorrow. But the hurt will still remain. In your soul I'll live forever till I'm melting in.
Don't miss our new film, The Love Song of William H. Shaw, coming soon to a streaming service near you. Hey everyone, this is Cliff from Talking Pondo. Just wanted to give you a quick heads up about spoilers on the show. We do talk about the films in a certain amount of detail, so you may want to watch the film first and then come back if you're not a fan of spoilers. Also, every now and then there's a little bit of adult language, so we wanted to give you fair warning on that. We hope you enjoy the episode, and we really appreciate you listening.
Welcome to Making Pondo and Talking Pondo. Talking Pondo is a podcast where we pick out 2 movies each week and talk about them in detail. Making Pondo is a podcast where we talk to people we've made films with and we discuss all their experiences on set.
All right, Marty, we're back.
Yes.
Back for episode 32. Wow. 32, I know. 32 episodes of Talking Pondo. I guess that makes about, if releasing them weekly, it's about, 6 months?
Yeah. It's crazy.
Well, no, it's 7 months. Jeez. Almost
So-
8. No, it's 8 months. Oh, good God with the math, Cliff.
Yeah, because next week will be our last original Making Pondo, but that's even the live one. So that means by the time you're hearing this, all of our old school banked content, it's all been released. So you won't be hearing anything that's much older than maybe 4 months. From
Carol's right after this, right? So
that's true. Yeah, Carol's next week.
That's the last of it. So yeah, tune in next week for Carol.
And then I guess, some of the makings will back up as well. And then we'll get some nice vintagey. But you might not have noticed, but some of our shows were from the past. But they're all evergreen because we're talking about, non-current stuff. Like today's movies. This is Talking Pondo, where we talk about movies. We give each other a movie to watch each week. Cliff gave me the film Band-Aid.
Yep.
And then I gave him the film, I believe you pronounce it Mon Oncle, or something like that.
Mon Oncle.
Oncle. That's the French title, or My Uncle, if you want to be American about it.
Yep.
So those are the 2 picks for the week.
They were interesting picks, I think. But
Different.
Different. I'm interested to see how you figured out how these movies are related, because I don't see any connection at all.
Yeah, I think they're both movies.
Both movies is about as close as you're gonna get.
Yeah.
There's no common theme. There's no common element in them. There's nothing that I could find that.
No.
The garage. It's a garage band, and there's an automatic garage in Mono.
That is true. See, I didn't even think of that.
That's about as close as I can get.
Mhm.
That's as close as I can get. Which one do you want to cover first?
Oh, I don't know. You pick this time. How about?
Well, let's do your pick. Let's do Mon Oncle.
The winner of Best Foreign Film from 1958. This might be the first movie from the 50s. that we've watched.
Yeah, I think
Certainly
it
the
is.
first Jacques Tati film. An important filmmaker who my dumbass didn't even know of his existence before about a year ago. Well, you can't know everything. But so what is this movie about? What is your description of it?
I'm gonna honestly have to read you. Like, if you asked me to explain this movie to you
Mm-hmm.
without some sort of prepared statement in front of me, I don't think I could honestly do it. The movie doesn't have a plot per se. It's Monsieur Hulot visits the technology-driven world of his sister, brother-in-law, and nephew, but he doesn't quite fit into the surroundings.
Yeah, he stays with them while he tries to get a job in the modern world, but he's from like the old world. So.
Monsieur Hulot's brother-in-law is the manager of a factory where plastics are manufactured. His nephew grows up in a house where everything's fully automated, and the boy is raised in a similar fashion. To take away the influence of the uncle on his son, the brother-in-law gets Hulot a job in his factory. Right away, I don't feel like any of that is set up in the movie.
No, it's more just like you're watching the events unfold. It's not really feels like it's plot driven or anything.
Well, I just mean I didn't know that Hulot had moved into town. I didn't know that he was looking for a job. Those things are just not. It's just not even spoken of. It's just like at some point they're like, "Oh, your brother-in-law is annoying. Let's get him a job."
Right.
The movie starts with some very interesting credits. I give it credit for its interesting credits. The opening titles are super interesting. Obviously, early CGI. The French were way ahead of their time with that stuff. And
well, you think it's part of the building, and you realize, hey, these are the credits on the signs.
Yeah. It's a very creative way to do it.
The dogs are showing you the story. That it's through the dog's point of view for like the first 5 minutes or something, right?
The fucking French. Why is the Queen of England grabbing that dog? Why do one of the characters look like one of the Dursleys from Harry Potter? It's this, and I don't know if this is actually France in the 50s, but it looks like this weird, otherworldly America, McCarthy, just like it feels very. I don't know. It's like I keep watching the film going, did they shoot this in France? Because it looks like it. But yeah, the cars are all French and everything, but it still looks like it looks like America.
Mm-hmm. In that Criterion print, they really cleaned that up. I'm like, I have to keep telling myself this is 1950s. I feel like it's almost the 60s, the way it's so colorful and whatnot. But I know what you mean. It feels like it's out of space and time in that way.
Yeah. It's a weird French U.S. McCarthy utopia. I understand what he's going for, this sort of comment on modern society and on how, electronics and mechanical things are kind of taking over. That woman's kitchen is like a fucking complete whole thing.
Right. He doesn't want an egg from that machine. He wants to go eat dirty pastries with the kids out in the street instead.
Right. I work in plastics, which means I'm the reason for them. I'm the reason there'll be microparticles in your nutsack.
Yep.
The colors look very weird. It feels like it's almost Turnerized, like it's one of those movies that Turner color. Back in the 80s. If you don't know this, kids, back in the 80s, this guy named Ted Turner, he was a pretty rich dude in Atlanta, and he had some cable stations, TNT, still out there. I think he started CNN. And he just had the idea of I hate watching black and white movies, so I'm just going to digitally color them. And he started, this whole move of digitally colorizing these films, and they looked awful. The color choices didn't look good. It didn't look right. And I'm sure with CGI and such, it probably would look better. But I don't know if it's the way they exposed the film, the way they processed it, but it looks very
gray. Yeah.
It's these weird colors, like that Chevy is. I've never seen a Chevy Bel Air in France, first off, and I've never seen one that was lavender, purple, and green all at the same time. I was like, this is fucking insane.
That's why I'd like to see an HD version of the movie because I think that would help remove some of the deficiencies in the DVD copy. Even though it's Criterion, there's still moments of artifacting, and it's like, oh, they could do a better print. Like I mentioned last week, if the way to see this would be on the big screen, I think, because on TV you miss stuff. Because like the giant long shots where he's like going up the stairs and the building and moving.
It's all giant long shots. The
It's
entire
meant to
fucking
be-
movie's just masters.
Yeah, it's not meant to be seen on a television, right?
There are very little cut-ins. There are very few close-ups. It's just
Yeah.
one. It's just one master that pans the entire time. You know, master.
Yeah, and
Master.
yet they're meticulously plotted out and laid out shots. It's just a weird style that you don't see anymore because people don't make things for just large format viewing only. I don't think,
Well,
especially it's 4:3 on top of it, which makes it extra weird.
It is 4:3. It's obvious that well, I don't know obvious, but it sure felt like he only had one lens. He's like, here's our
Probably.
camera, here's our lens. That's what we're shooting with. Move on.
Mhm.
The audio is rough. It's really, really rough. I've read some people say, "Oh, I love the soundtrack," and I'm like, that mix is really bad, and I just don't want to ever fucking hear any more accordion or concertina for the rest of my life now. The whole movie is basically, if it's not that, it's this jazz that they're playing,
Mhm.
or it's this weird sort of oompa loompa.
It's almost like a silent movie.
One of my comments was going to be, it mostly is a silent movie because the subtitles are really lacking. Like, I'm watching a movie where there's a whole party and people are babbling, but I got no context because I don't fucking speak French. And the subtitles are just giving you the actual like dialogue that you need to move the story along, right? So I felt like I might enjoy this a bit better if I kind of had more context. Like this movie is just basically French people arguing constantly. It's every scene has a fucking argument. Some French guy, and I'm just like, this might be better if I understood what the fuck he was saying.
I like that it was kind of non-dialogue. Like, I think that makes it more universal. That it
Well, I mean, the
played
Hulot
around.
dialogue, the
Yeah.
shtick that you never hear Hulot talk makes him. I like that with his character for sure.
He's like the original Mr. Bean in a way. You know?
I found him to be basically the French version of Jerry Lewis.
Well,
And
you
it
can
made-
see why
and
they
it-
think he's a genius.
Exactly. It made me understand more of like, oh, that's why the French are mad about Jerry Lewis, because he's very much like Tati or Hulot, Tati doing Hulot in this film. And I'm sure it's that this whole series of films are like this.
Well, each one that I've seen 3 of them, and they're decidedly different from each other. The first
But
one,
what I mean is like sight gags.
Oh, his
the
character
fish out of
kind of-
water. His character, yeah.
like Playtime goes even further with the technological. It's probably an overall better movie, even though this one's got a little more heart to it, I think. And then that first one, well, I don't know if it's the first one, but the M. Hulot's Holiday, that one's so early in the 50s that it almost feels like it's a movie from the 40s. So it's weird if you start there and then it's like, whoa, this character really is from another time period. I remember him in this old black and white movie, and now it's like weird how you have like the new world over here and then the old world over here. One of the shots that stands out to me the most is just that stone wall where the dogs keep jumping over it. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of like the divider line between where the progress is and where what you're looking at. Like you said, it looks so weird. Like it probably hadn't changed in hundreds of years. So what kind of weird, interesting, fascinating time machine to look at. Just through a film history perspective, it was kind of like, oh, this was a little gap, and now I understand things a little bit, have a little bit more of a, like the Jerry Lewis thing, even. But like I also see so many comedic people that were influenced by this, where it's just like, oh, you don't get to Wes Anderson without this. You don't get to so many people pulled from these type of things through Python and.
I'm fine not getting to Wes Anderson.
Oh, I am too, but I'm just saying I thought it was kind of neat how
I get it.
the family tree keeps spreading. Yeah.
I mean, I can see back in the 50s where you'd be like, this is pretty creative. This is pretty inventive. It's for me, it's a slow movie. It's way too long.
It is long.
Its timing it's a 2-hour fucking movie, dude. And its timing is rough. Like it doesn't, it drags in scenes. It really languishes.
Yeah, I thought it was
You
slow
know,
the first time I watched it. This was my second time, and now knowing everything, we've discussed this before in the show, that maybe a movie should kick on the first time, but sometimes movies reveal themselves more to you the more you watch them. And the second time, I was like, oh, the pacing felt quicker because I know it's going to be this part, then this part, this part, this part done. Well, the
yeah,
first time I didn't know what was going on, and this time I'm marveling at how hard it is to control dogs. And at some points that wiener dog is actually reacting to what the people are saying, and I'm just like, wow, that's a well trained dog.
um, yeah. This is back to the point where acting, especially stage acting, is sort of either completely understated or ridiculously overdone. There's not a lot of not method, but there's not a lot of. It's all about kind of over exaggerating or under exaggerating for effect, right? So it's to me, it's just a series of gags. The whole movie is just a series of gags. The house gag, the truck goes by and splashes the dude, and then he comes by and splashes him again. That gag. It's just gag after gag, and they all seem to lead to just people screaming at each other, like arguing with each other. These kids are just
Wow,
like,
that sounds like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
yeah, it's exactly. And these kids are kind of ratty ass little kids. Like I don't like his nephew. I think his nephew's a shit, honestly. Like these kids are all sitting around eating friggin' food and taking bets on whether or not they can make people run into lampposts,
Right. And
which
then ends up being
which
the
is
thing
funny.
that bonds him with his dad.
Right at the end, yeah, and it's funny and it's whatever. But at the same time, it's like, ugh, these fucking kids.
It's like things that, like you said, if we'd been around and seen that back then, but now we've seen 60 some 70 years of after the facts. You go back and it's like kids going, I don't understand, like the Beatles or something. And it's like, oh, because you've gotten so much of everything else that it's just so dissolved in, like those gags. You've seen those gags a million times and other things, and that was probably one of the original times of seeing those gags. So, like you said, 1958, it probably hit a lot harder.
I would imagine so.
And I think on the big screen with the audience is probably how this should be seen too, to make it effective that way.
I guess, like I said, this is back in the day where comedy was, even like Animal Crackers. When you go 20 years earlier and look at Animal Crackers, or, then what you get is, again, you have a kind of a main storyline, but you pretty much ignore it, and it's a bunch of gags, and then you resolve the main storyline at the end, and there's your movie.
Yeah,
and that's sort of this is an extension of that, which is
device
like
to hang the character on.
Gag, watch the character. Gag. Okay, he's got to get a job. He's driving everybody crazy. Okay, now he leaves. Boom. Type of thing. I thought the fountain being for important guests was kind of a funny thing. That was a pretty good gag. It does some things. Well, it just doesn't do all of it well for me.
Well, that's true. It's not perfect, but it's there's enough there that I was, thought it was interesting. There's that word again. I like when he's sneaking out at night, I think it is, and you see how the
people in the window with the eyeballs. Yeah, that was really well done.
You got to get the shot
some
right.
clever bits.
No CG. It's probably a one camera shoot. I mean,
it's definitely a one camera shoot. There's one lens,
so
one
much
camera.
Planning that had to go into that. It's just so meticulous, or at least it feels that way.
I have a note here that says, Hulot has mistakenly wandered into another predicament, which is basically what the movie is. It's just it's the entire movie. And again, people screaming at each other. Some people might find this charming. It didn't capture
he's the one who never screams at anybody, right? He never.
Yeah, he never says anything. Yeah. Except when he punches that old man. But it just didn't. It didn't like. I get why people would find it charming. For me, it wasn't charming. It was that the soundtrack, especially that accordion, that concertina. I
can understand that. Yeah.
I had to take my headphones. I was listening to it on headphones, and I had to take my headphones out and just put it on the TV to make it a little less.
Oh,
in my face.
Not a headphones movie, I wouldn't think.
it kind of wanders. It's that old, like we talked about, it's that old style of comedy where a farce is sort of ridden to its most ridiculous conclusion, and then the scene ends, and then the next one starts up. The party
There wouldn't
scenes.
be Cheech and Chong movies without this. Is how I felt. In a way.
I mean, I can kind of see that. Yeah, the party scene is a perfect example where by the end of it, you've got one guest who's dug himself into a giant hole to fix a sprinkler, and Hilo has broken the party fares, and that woman with the cigarette, she blows out that smoke, and it's just like a dragon at one point.
And it's holding once again on a wide shot, and all this is happening all at once in the frame, and it's all there. You don't lose anything.
Well, it's shot like a play.
Well, that's true too.
It's shot like a play. And shot in that sort of old school style of just like stick the camera in front of the actors, let the actors do what they need to do. I mean, we've done that. The windows and the eyeballs, I had to note about that, is pretty creative. I liked that quite a bit. Seeing a Chevy Bel Air, I think it's a 56 or a 55, but seeing one in France was...
Is that the car he buys towards the end?
Yeah, I was pretty surprised by that.
He just throws the cigarette lighter out the window.
Yeah, so it's Jerry Lewis without the Hey Lady. It's what it is, man. It's
he's a little more subtle than that, but I know what you mean.
There's a lot of mime type gags in the film too. Like you can tell it's heavily influenced by the silent stuff. By the end of it, I was desperate for it to end. Like, because I remember looking at it and going, "Oh, there's 10 minutes left. Okay, great." And this fucker rides it to like the last 30 seconds and then goes to black. And I was just like, "Oh, thank you."
Now, had you heard of this director before or seen any of his films before?
I had, yeah. I think I'd seen Monsieur Hulot's Holiday at some point, because that one, when I looked it up, sounded very familiar. But it's been, I saw it as a kid on like, UHF television station, that type of thing, long time ago. So either that or like a PBS thing or something like that. So it'd been a long time since I'd actually seen any of his movies. I was aware of who he is. But like a lot of French cinema, it just doesn't grab me. I love their noir stuff. A lot of their noir stuff is really dope, but their comedy sometimes is very hit or miss for me. I love La Cage aux Folles. I thought that's great. So it hits and then it doesn't, and this one just didn't. I don't know. It didn't stick with me. I found myself really kind of grinding my teeth through the last 30 minutes of it.
I mean, I can understand that, but for me, as the movie goes on, and even the second time watching it through, it was like, there's something captured in there that I'm really resonating with, where it's like, oh, you managed to catch life in action. And it's so hard to do in film, and I feel that it feels... I know that it's a lot of sticky stuff, but there's also something authentic in there. I can't quite put my finger on.
What did you feel was authentic about it? Because
I'm just like the window into...
You mentioned the dogs and things.
The life of the it's just the dirty part of the town, and it's like the kids and the whole atmosphere of it just felt like less of a movie and more like I just turned a camera on. And I know that's not what they did, but it just kind of has that almost... There was a realistic sensation, and it gives me feels by the end of it. And I'm like, whoa, they did something where it's like, I understand it's not the whole sum of its parts. There's parts of it that are like, the whole, when the tube's going crazy, I'm sure that was a laugh riot in 1958, but that's kind of like the sloggy part for me. Sure. But I get it. He has to get fired somehow. Sure. But then when it all comes together and like, I don't know, it's a little sappy, but then I like the kid finally coming to terms with his dad, and it wouldn't have happened if the uncle hadn't shown up. And I know it's kind of basic, but there's just something about it that just, I'm like, okay, it hits pretty strong in some of those parts for me. So
I really felt like, for me, that just, I didn't pull that from it. I felt like a lot of that stuff was very much sort of tacked on so that, again, you could do the gag, you could do the joke, you could do the thing. I just, it's not for me. I'll put it to you that way. I get it. And I get it. I get why it's important. And I understand that people find it charming for certain reasons. I understand all that. But for me, it just didn't do It just didn't do it. It just
Right.
didn't do it. I don't want to shit on it because
Oh, yeah.
it's an interesting film. Like I said, there's a few gags in there that are pretty good. The automatic garage door is pretty fucking hilarious. You know,
Nobody had done that yet, right?
nobody had done that. It's creative. The automatic door in general, the house in general, is pretty kind of creative. But what really killed it for me was a lot of the Foley. The Foley is terrible. The mix is not good. Like she's turning levers and things, and it's just like, grrr,
Yeah,
grrr. And I'm like, oh,
it's
dude.
loud but obnoxious.
Yeah, it's
I
really
guess
loud
hearing
and
it through
obnoxious.
headphones would have sucked. I would suspect. I'm just sitting here kind of forgiving the creakiness of some of that,
Yeah,
even though I know it's not. You know,
I mean, there
I
are
don't think in
films.
HD and a remix on a DTS, they might.
There are
equalize
films
that
from that
sound.
era that don't have that problem though, which is why I don't forgive it. You know, I
Mhm.
mean, there are films from that era and before it that are technically visually and audio marvels. They're wonderful films.
Well, maybe they were trying to be harsh, like Bonnie and
this one's
Clyde.
like-
Ride this during the sound effect or something. I don't know.
I guess, yeah. I just it didn't work for me.
It did seem like it was a deliberate choice to be that obnoxious with the sound, though, right? Like maybe that played better in a packed house with the boom with the sound. Or, I
Yeah,
don't know.
maybe.
But
It was-
if they do make an HD, I would like to watch it again to hear a better mix. Because like the Marx Brothers, when they finally put those on Blu-ray, it sounds so much better. Like they got rid of a lot of the hiss and pop and shit while still retaining the original sound. So this one's kind of in desperate need of an HD upgrade, and it might already be on the Criterion channel for all I know. The DVD I watched was a Criterion from quite a few years back, so I think it's out of print, that version. Some of our listeners might be like, I'd like to watch this movie, but I can't find it.
Yeah, you'll have to look for it. It's probably not an easy find. It's worth a look for novelty's sake, but it's not something
If
I'll
you're
ever
a film
watch again.
historian, I feel like
I guess. I
you
mean,
got to at least see one of these to.
sure. So you understand the flavor and what he did and what people are talking about with it, and it does. I mean, it does do some things that a lot of people do later, but I don't know that he's the first to do those in that film, right? I mean, he could be
Probably
he
not
could
like Buster Keaton
he
extension.
could be exactly. He could be repeating things that have been done earlier, but it's very in that, like you said, Keaton. It's like it's like a French Buster Keaton,
right,
married to Jerry Lewis, and they had a kid.
Yeah,
and there it is.
Mm-hmm. And suddenly, a lot more things in comedy make more sense to me. I almost wish that Jacques Tati was still alive and making film. I know he'd be really old, but you know what I mean. Like as far as I know, I haven't seen Traffic or some of his other movies. Maybe he did relate to this, but I'd like to see him deal with the beta testing of technology. Yeah, technology's got bugs in it, but that's the first version. We got to work the fucking bugs out. What's Hulo's response to a tablet or something like that? Where it's like, maybe all technology is not bad, but technology does sometimes make things more of a pain in the ass. We still deal with that every day. So, but at the same time, technology's not all bad, right? Because it does good things. The old ways work too. I want to see
Without it, we wouldn't be doing this podcast. That's for sure.
Yeah. First time I watched the movie, I was kind of like, oh yeah, they're thumbing their nose at the tech. That's him throwing the fucking lighter out the window. It's got that kind of. And this time I was like, oh, it's like, no, we got to find a balance between the two. The two got to work together. The old way and the new way, the tech and preserving, our humanity in a way, kind of. I don't know. It's a thinker.
I think that a lot of people. This is one of those films where you can sit there and argue about.
That's true too.
You can sit there and argue about context and what's implied and and the intent and that type of thing, which I think is why people love movies like this.
Yeah,
because it doesn't clearly state anything, and like I said, like you talk about, he kind of has that last scene in the poll, and he reconciles with his kid. He doesn't really. They just grab hands and that's it, and you're left to kind of assume that that's some sort of reconciliation, right?
Type scenario, yeah.
Well, but that's what I'm saying, right? Like he doesn't. It's the only thing that's really spelled out in the movie are the gags. Other than that, everything's sort of left to some sort of weird interpretation of
Well,
whether or
that's
not
kind
you
of
think that's funny.
that's
Whether
the
you think,
magic of it,
you
right?
know,
The
what
getting
did
away
what does
with
it
it.
mean?
Because they set all that up, and yet it allowed for subtext to be projected on it from an audience. So it's like, ooh, look at this extra layer of this trick we pulled off. We're over here doing Emperor's New Clothes. It's just a series of sight gags draped over a character, but then
I see this is, and I just think people, I don't know. I think people are reading too much into it. I just don't think the movie has all that. I think the movie's
too much.
I think the movie's doing what it's doing, and I didn't find a lot of subtext in the movie other than,
as we've discovered, every movie has its audience, right?
Annoying, bumbling dude,
Some movies talk to people in different ways. It's a trip.
Yeah.
What do you give this one?
2.
2. My God.
Yeah, 2.
I give it 4.5.
No.
Yeah.
Not even close. Not even close.
Well, not everything is for everybody, as we learn every week here on this show.
I look. I'm not. Again, I'm not shitting on the movie. I guess I probably kind of am, but
well, hey, everybody's allowed their opinion and their taste. That's
I understand. Sure, yeah, sure. I understand why somebody would like it. I get it. I get why it's historically important cinematically. For me, it's just.
Well, it doesn't mean that you have to like it.
Yeah, there are a lot of other movies from that time period I would much rather watch.
Mm-hmm. So
having said that,
the other movie we watched was Band-Aid.
Yes.
A movie I thought was going to be a pleasant little comedy about people making a band. But see, I didn't know anything about it, so I can't say I was baited and switched because I literally knew nothing about going in, which is kind of nice sometimes. So what is Band-Aid from 2017?
2017, yeah. Written, directed, and starring Zoe Lister-Jones. A couple of
everything.
Yeah, she did quite a bit. I would be surprised she probably cut some film on it too. Couple who can't stop fighting embark on a last-ditch effort to save their marriage, turning their fights into songs and starting a band. There's a storyline is a couple who can't stop fighting embark on a last-ditch effort to save their marriage. So that's it. So basically, it's about two people who have had a miscarriage and they're in a bad place in their relationship, and all they do is fight, and they're in therapy for it.
Hey, that's what they're in common: fighting.
There you go. Okay, take that. So
boy, do they fight a lot in this movie. They turn their fights into songs.
And now that you point it out, it's like, yeah, actually, that's because and there's a lot of arguing in there's so much arguing in My Uncle that it's just like, okay, yeah, that's definitely a. Now that you point it out, it's definitely commonality. But yeah, so they've had a miscarriage. They're in a bad place. They're not talking. They're fighting all the time.
And we don't learn about the miscarriage till like almost halfway through the movie. So
right.
You know what's.
Yeah, the movie starts with them having an argument, and then they get high and go to her friend's kid's birthday party where they kind of make fools of themselves playing with all the kids' toy instruments, right? And they sing a song and all this kind of weird stuff because they're high off their asses. But anyways, then they go to therapy. The therapist is played by Retta from Parks and Rec, which is a lot of fun. And their therapist quits on them. It's basically like, hey, I'm moving. You guys fight a lot. See ya. And Zoe Lister-Jones's character, I can't remember her name. She has the idea, why don't we just turn all of our fights into songs? Let's do that. Well, all we do is fight. Let's try something different. And so they dig their old instruments out. I guess they were both musically inclined in high school or whatever, and decide to start a band where they sing their fights into songs.
Right.
And of course, right away as they're playing in their garage, their neighbor shows up. Fred Armisen is their neighbor, and he's a freaking weirdo. And
he's giving perfect weirdo vibes.
He does give perfect weirdo vibes, and he offers to be their drummer, and they don't want anything to do with him at first. But then, of course, he can actually play, and they let him join the band.
Because much like Jack Black and in High Fidelity, you find out, oh, this guy really is a musician, because Fred Armisen was a punk drummer before he was a comedian.
Yeah.
And it kind of, this whole movie gives me this feeling of, this is like, we've seen some movies on here where we're like, oh, that's an actor's movie. or that's a director's movie. This feels like this was a musician's
Yeah,
movie.
man, that's a good point.
Like musicians made a comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. My favorite line right off the beginning is, "How could there be a long line of Holocaust survivors?" Where she's like, "I come from a long line of Holocaust survivors," and he immediately checks her with like, "How could there be a long line of Holocaust survivors?" You kind of, by the end of the first fight, in my opinion, you kind of get why they're together.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the first fight, they end up singing "fuck you, fuck you, fuck you" to each other,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just like, "Oh, that's okay," because you two are very much alike. That's why you're together. You're very much kind of the same person.
Yeah, while watching it, I could see why you like it, because it has so many things where you're like, oh, that feels like the scene from one of our movies or the way we would have done it, and so
Yeah.
like, yeah, there's enough of that in there where it was like, oh, wow, okay.
It felt very raw to me. The movie
Mhm.
feels very, very raw and very. It's a vulnerable movie. They really put it out there. Like, I mean, this is a couple that's kind of in crisis to a certain extent.
Yeah, you gave me that before I gave it to you.
Yeah,
That type of movie.
yeah.
I was like, oh, I'm gonna hit Cliff with one of these type of movies first, and I'm gonna feel bad about it, and then he fucking gives me one first. So
Sorry, man.
No. It's just,
Yeah.
but this movie has levels of reality to it.
It's
that
so
are-
such a personal fucking movie to me. It feels very, very personal. Like, I'm not talking about my own life in this movie, but I'm just like, God, who did?
Yeah, they really
Did she actually go through this?
real
This
stuff.
seems so fucking personal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, blink and you'll miss Colin Hanks.
Yes, yeah. Just for a second, there's also a comedian. The other dude, Chris something, is a comedian. I think he got taken out by the Me Too movement, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow. Well, that's weird to be in this movie. That's like, if you look at the crew, it's like 90% women made this film.
Yeah.
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 When we brought
That's all I
Biscuit
need.
on as an associate producer on
It's
Love
fantastic.
Song, I felt like it shifted a bit. It wasn't just four dudes making a movie. It was like, oh, now we got, like a woman's touch in here. And it's like, I would like more of that, because you look at Band-Aid and you get to the end credits and you go, wow, this is made by almost all women. And it's like, well, that's why it has this feeling
feel.
to it, where it's got more of that levels of reality, like I was saying, where it was like they feel like a real couple in parts. So a
Yeah.
lot more
Yeah.
than
A lot more, so much more. That's
This
what I'm talking
movie's
about.
not perfect, but it does.
No.
Yeah.
It's at one point during the therapist scene, I have a note there that they basically just crossed the 180 line, and I'm like, oh, that's a little jarring. Who decided to do that? That's not normally not something that you would do in a film. You don't cross the 180 line. You don't shove the camera over to a completely different side like that. But I guess it kind of worked. Going to your friend's kid's party after you've had a miscarriage, that's got to be fucking tough.
Right.
Like, no wonder you're getting high off your ass.
Oh yeah, they get high a lot in the beginning of the movie.
Yep.
And then one of my criticisms is there's a scene later on in the movie where they're like, "No, I want to be
President. She says, "I want to be president."
And I'm thinking, why is this scene even in the movie? You're turning this into Reefer Madness. We don't see them smoke anymore. Just delete that scene. I did not like that scene.
I mean, I think that for a lot of people who smoke weed, they use it as an escape from reality. And what she's saying is, I don't need to escape from reality anymore. I get it.
Yeah. I get why it's there. I just
I hear you.
That really made you go, wait a minute. Stick to your story. Don't be sending a message at me.
I don't think that was trying to. Well, okay. I mean, if you took that, I didn't feel like it was a message. To me, it was more like her saying, I don't need this. I don't need this crutch anymore. I'm good.
I just think it would have flowed smoother if you just don't see them smoke anymore, because you don't. They kind of stop about.
Well, and that's the difference. I think that's the difference between.
I think they were trying to point it out.
Look at the, like we just talked about with the Tati movie, right? Look at how he doesn't do anything at all like that. He doesn't spell anything out. He doesn't point. He doesn't nothing dialogue like that. And current movies are more to that vein, and I think that's probably why that's probably what I struggled with some of that Tati stuff, where I'm like, you really have to basically assume a lot of subtext, right? And instead she gives it to you by saying, I don't want to smoke anymore. I want to be president. I don't, and so you know that she's kind of putting
Oh,
that aside.
yeah, I
It's
understand.
just, I
They're
think
putting
it's
it in
just a
there to make that
difference.
movie.
It's a difference in preference, right?
Mhm.
Like, yeah. Um, what
Well,
else
it's
do
once again, I would prefer decisions made that would create a different movie, which means that's not a valid criticism on my part, because if I'm thinking, oh, that, then they're not telling the story that they were trying to tell.
Well, I think it's fine to criticize it. It's, you know, it's like I said, it's like with the Hulu. I recognize the talent. I recognize why people like it. Why people might find it charming. It just didn't hit for me, right?
Mhm.
It's like if it's like with music. If it's a banger, it's a banger. If it isn't, it isn't. Move on. You know. That scene where he's got where they do the song about Papa John's. And
Mhm.
she's helping him with the harmonica with the pizza in it,
Oh
wiping
yeah,
his
as
mouth.
gross as it is, those are the
It's
best scenes in the movie where they're
it's
making their songs.
it's funny, yeah. I love the garage stuff. I love the one where Armisen is trapped in the garage and he just goes, "I'm just going to play. If you guys aren't going to let me leave, I'm just going to play." You know, that's really great.
And it's those creative moments, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful product placement. A song about Papa John's, right? I think my favorite scene in the movie is also the scene where you kind of go, "Oh no, don't do that." Where they sit down to start to write down the list of their fights that they're going to turn into songs.
Oh yeah,
And
'cause
you're
you
just
know
like,
where
"Oh,
that's
don't
going.
do that." You know where that's going, and it does. Like 30 seconds into it, it's like, "Well, you're a bitch. You're a fucking lazy asshole." It's just like, wow.
Like that thing you do. Remember, I'm like, they play the same song over and over again, and you're like, yeah, but you get the progression of how the song gets better. On this
True.
one, they give you different songs, but
Different
you get
songs.
a progression through different songs.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I like that.
That's a good point. I really liked how they did when they finally got on stage and did their song. It was 4 or 5 different sets that they just cut back and forth to show you the progression of them playing different places. I thought that was a really smart choice. And again, it kept you from having to do the whole that thing you do and play the song over and over again. I like the fact that Fred Armisen's a complete weirdo. You know, that we're out of cocoa, and you know, a snuggle ought not be fought. You know, and I'm a sex addict, and I can't watch you fight like my parents. It's just so weird.
And I always enjoy movies like this that have just a couple of main characters, a couple of sets, because you can tell they're doing a lot with little.
Yeah, very little. Yeah.
I always appreciate those because it's like, okay, yeah.
Well, he was a star in the Yiddish vaudeville circuit, Marty. Okay.
Is that a joke? Is that not a joke? Am I
Is that a
supposed
joke?
to be
I don't know.
Am I funny? Am I a clown?
That some of that stuff feels like it belongs in like the 40-year-old virgin. You know, like the
Right?
Weird Dave stuff kind of feels like it goes. It's almost a little incongruous with the rest of the movie, but it's still really funny.
How interesting that you bring that up, because this is a segue into my biggest issue with the film.
Oh, okay.
This movie is a post-bridesmaid movie.
Mhm.
It has women being gross or having the nasty kind of comedy. And it's like you said, it is funny. But for me, I wish they had leaned one way or the other, because I do like the movie, but I felt that it was a great movie hiding in there, but the movie didn't get out of its own way in order to get there. Because it has its levels of reality, but unfortunately, it always uses the stand-up type comedy to diffuse the awkwardness. It's a conscious design that they did this, but to me it feels false. I wish they had been more fearless or more funny. Go more awkward or go more funny. But when it gets awkward and they stop and it's like, I'm doing my bit, it's like, I know what you're doing, and it's because you're telling this particular story. But wow, what a fucking intense, like, really critically acclaimed movie that would have been if it had leaned into the awkwardness, or if when you spike in the funny, it's really funny enough to diffuse. But I know what they were going for. They're going more for the movie about the fight, I think, and they it's one of the best on-screen couple fighting movies I've ever seen, because it's a very realistic depiction in parts. And
It's also
I think
funny.
it felt like they had to step back
brutally
and
funny at
go
points.
full bore, because it's Tropic Thunder at that point, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in this movie, I feel like it's like, oh, you need to step back a bit and give me a little something to connect with, because when you step over, but that's these characters though.
Yeah, I love the scene where they've got Dave trapped in the garage, and he's like, "I'll just leave," and they're like, "No, Dave, let's give us a minute. We'll figure this
He
out."
knows
He's
they're
like,
going to keep fighting.
and she at one point screams at him, and it's just like, "If you leave, this gets real." And I'm just like, these two are fucking hilarious. And hilarious in their own, like, they're so wrapped up in their own shit. They're so absorbed with their own bullshit, and it's really funny.
I'm glad the movie's aware of this.
Yeah.
The one scene where the husband is talking to his mom, I guess it is, at the end.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she's doing I'm laying out the heartfelt advice thing.
Yeah.
And then
that part to me is a little over. I'm like, I
Right.
wish you'd done something a little differently there.
Right. But
Yeah.
the one silver lining in that scene is the dude goes, are you being a little reductive? And I'm thinking, yeah, the whole fucking movie's being a little reductive and saying that men are one way and women are this way. But the movie's aware that it's being reductive, as the mother says, well, in my experience.
Right.
And we're just watching a movie about these two characters' experience. And I'm glad that the movie is aware of itself. I just, to my earlier point, I wish it had went a little bit more full bore in, because it's like I'm sitting here going, this is not all men and all women. And men aren't the problem, women aren't the problem, humans are the problem. There's no male gaze, there's no female gaze, it's the human gaze. There's people.
I agree with you.
But it's a good movie though. I understand what they're going for, but once again, it got me going.
I think to treat men and women the same in emotional instances is probably a mistake. Men and women are different; they react differently. I think she was trying to point that out, but I agree with you.
They react differently, and the movie made it feel like all women do this and all men do this. But aren't you being a little reductive? Well, yeah, I'm just telling you about my personal experience.
Well, anytime that you generalize like that, yeah, you're going to be a little reductive. I mean, that's why a lot of people don't like generalizations in general. See what I did there? But
it's part of what made me continue to like the movie. I was like, it's aware, it knows what it's doing.
That's also sometimes you generalize to make things funny, or you generalize to explain something, because there is no one size fits all for everybody in the fucking universe. And we know that, right? Yeah. And if we go into these types of movies with that understanding, then we can kind of take them. And it's like watching a fucking rom-com. Not every girl wants fucking this or that, or not every dude's going to chase this type of girl, whatever. Mm-hmm. But you kind of go, okay, I know that we're just dealing with stereotypes and generalizations to a certain point. And sometimes you kind of have to, I guess. Maybe not always. But I totally get your point, though. I definitely understand what you're saying, and I agree with it.
And the writer, producer, director, everything, I think she would have done herself a favor to let somebody else direct the movie.
I thought she did a really good job.
Wearing too many hats, or at least have somebody else come in as a complete outsider and do a punch up on the script. It felt like it was so insular.
It felt, I feel like it might have lost its. It felt
and
like
again, like I'm saying, it would be a different movie. So
yeah, the movie feels very personal, and I feel like it's very personal because she wrote it, she directed, and she stars in it. Right? Mm-hmm. That scene where they're having sex, and she says, "Finish inside me," and it freaks him out, and he's like, "No," she's like, "I'm ready to have a kid again," and they start arguing, and she's just laying there nude. All I could think of was put a shirt on. Like, you're so fucking vulnerable in that moment. I want you to put something on to give yourself some armor while you're arguing with this guy.
Well, that's what makes it.
It's too vulnerable. It was really fantastic, mm-hmm. right? It was awkward and vulnerable and like really specifically well done. And I'm sure she chose to do it that way to get that out of the audience.
It's just when it falls into something that's tropey, where I'm like, oh, I get it, because you're just mm-hmm. trying to get this movie mm-hmm. made and mm-hmm. you're limited and everything. But
it definitely does hit some tropes.
You're right. There was greatness hiding in there with that mm-hmm. that premise of singing the arguments, and
yeah.
You didn't just have to go into the get out, don't come back, and all of that. And then mm-hmm. I don't know. I just felt like there was. If somebody ever does a remake of this one day, maybe.
I'd love to see it. I'd love to see a rewrite and a remake of this. That'd be interesting.
It's a very good film. I give it 3 stars.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought the mushroom trip was great. I thought that was very funny. Taking mushrooms on
I
the
forgot
beach.
about that.
That was pretty good. Oh, do you remember when they talk about Dave being Dave the baby drummer?
Oh yeah, that was like some.
I feel like
weird
that's some
little-
I feel like that's some deleted scene shit that we didn't see, where they were like, "You're gonna dress up as a baby and be the drummer, and that's gonna be our gag." Also, the Dirty Dishes is a great name for a band. I think that's a fucking great name for a band,
It's
and
like
it fits
that
the movie
type of
completely.
stuff. Like if this movie had managed to be as tight as that thing you do, then get out of the fucking way.
Get out! Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I
When
think
he
that was the thing where I was like, oh, it's holding me back because I see the potential.
Yeah.
But that was the whole point, give me a job movie.
When he tells her to sing her feelings and she talks about being a failure as a woman, that's I took a little bit of inspiration from that for Love Song, because I felt like that was very realistic.
Right.
And failing makes you an artist, which is one of my favorite lines in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually he does the dishes.
Right. And eventually he does have feelings.
Uh-huh.
He had feelings the whole fucking time. Everybody has feelings.
He also goes really low. I mean, saying that, not having the baby was a blessing, that's a fucking low blow. I mean, that's
how he dealt with
real shit.
Like shutting down.
That's it. He dealt with all of it shutting down. Yeah. And I think you're right. It hits some tropes at the end where it's like, oh, I'll read a self-help book and I'll fix the leak in my life.
Now. And it's like, what happened to all that therapy you went and it took you sitting down on the couch reading a book?
Right, exactly. and so
it's ready to finally come to it at that point.
That's true, sure. But like you said, it's a little tropey. I wish they'd have handled it differently. Like they'd have handled this thing with him and his mom differently. Crying in front of the video game and all that.
Oh yeah. See, he can't enjoy those. See, because men could just have the little things to. I'm like, shut the fuck up. Don't generalize so much. That's wrong. Everybody's different. Everybody's complicated. Yes, there are some truths to stereotypes. That's why they're there.
That's why there are truths to generalizations.
That's why I appreciated the guy going, isn't that a little reductive? And she's like, well, I'm talking about in my experience. I'm like, thank you, movie. Thank you for being aware and acknowledging it, because that goes a long way with me.
Well, and the movie's self-aware. Again, it's like when she's like, I come from a long line of Holocaust survivors. He's like, how could you come there? There's no such thing as a long line of Holocaust survivors. What are you talking about? So it's self-aware. It calls itself out throughout the movie. Art is bullshit is one of my favorite lines in the movie, where he's like, art is bullshit. It's like, oh, dude, you've given up. You're an artist and you've given up on yourself.
See, that's why I feel like if they're musicians making a movie, like, and what I mean by that is like, okay, you went to the film school, the art school, and then I'm guessing you probably were trying to break as a musician. That's probably your first love. And then the movie things give its opportunity instead, and you come out that way because actors want to be musicians, want to be athletes, that old thing, want to be stand-up comedians. And so I feel like, oh, we're getting a swirl, but a very unusual movie. How did you even find this thing?
So I found it on YouTube, of all places. Wow. I stumbled across it on YouTube, and weirdly, one person had a 4K uploaded version of this movie, and I was like, for free? Okay. And within the first 10 minutes, I was like, okay, I'm going to watch this.
Yeah.
Like, it caught me real early.
And it has weird opening credits like the other movie. It doesn't tell you the opening title until like almost 10 minutes in when you see the garage door.
It's on the garage door. Yeah.
The garage door again. Yeah.
So it caught me, and much like The Late Game, I kind of saw a piece. I watched it, and I was immediately grabbed
I might like The Late Game a little bit more, but it is kind of in that same where I'm like, yeah, this went under the radar. If you never heard of it, find it, watch it. Not enough people know about it. There's more than enough good stuff going on in this one. I always tend to find a few things to pick on a little bit.
Sure.
But overall, this was really pretty solid.
It's also 90 minutes, so it's not trying to do too. It knows what it's trying to do. It's trying to tell you a story. It's trying to entertain you, and it's trying to get the hell out of your way. It's not trying to do no hour and 50, dragging this relationship out. It's like, okay, here it is. Here's the songs. Here's the relationship. Here's the end. Boom, done. And I think it succeeds in that respect. Yeah, like you said, dude, all female cast, all female crew. And apparently there was a week where Adam Polly was the only male on set the entire week. So
Wow.
that's pretty unusual. So you said 3 stars, huh?
Yeah, 3 I think is good for this one.
I'm gonna go just slightly higher and say 3.5, but I think you're right. I think you're right in the wheelhouse. And thinking on my Mon Oncle, I think I'm gonna go 2.5. 2's a little harsh. 2 indicates that it's a bad movie, and it's not a bad movie. It's just not a movie for me. So it isn't. It's not a bad movie.
Well, yeah, not everything is for everybody. Yeah.
Right. It's well made. It does what it does, and these types of things. It just wasn't for me. So 2.5 on that one, and then 3.5 on Band-Aid, because that movie is for me. I enjoy that movie quite a bit, and I've watched it probably 5 or 6 times.
Well, I probably won't watch it again.
I think it's funny.
It's good.
You know me and movies about bands and that type of thing.
Yeah, that's why I was like, yeah.
I really like the songwriting and the song creation parts of this movie are really good. Yeah, they're really, really good. And her first time on stage where she's so high on muscle relaxers that she's fucking around is really funny.
And I'm like,
funny.
They got a premise. They're going to, and then they kind of let that premise go a little bit, I thought. So
yeah, I hear you. All right, well, there you go, folks. Give Mon Oncle a watch. If not for enjoyment, then just for the idea that it's pretty solid in the lexicon of filmmaking history, and you should probably give it a watch. And Band-Aid, hey, if you like that type of movie, give it a watch.
Oh, Band-Aid's worth a look. Yeah,
I think so. I'm interested to see her make another movie. Honestly, I hope she does.
Yeah, it's been a while. She looks like she's mostly a TV person. Yeah.
Yep. We'll see.
So we're rapidly approaching the end of season 1, which really doesn't mean anything other than a way to keep track of episodes. But
that's true.
So
that's true.
Next
what
week,
do you got for me next week?
Next week, you'll be talking to Carol Edwards live at Tuscon. But no, the week after that is the beginning of the last 3 of the season. So it's basically like movies that got bumped and bumped and bumped and bumped because I kept coming up with other ideas. And your movie next week is Mystery Science Theater, the movie.
Really?
96. It's a movie. It is a movie. It's the only one I can sneak into the show.
Yeah, no. I'm great. Fucking A, that'll be the easiest watch of all time. I love that shit.
My only extra part is watch the deleted scenes.
Okay.
Well, because that rounds it out. It gives that extra host segment because I want to be able to talk about, do you think they should have left it in, blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to cram it in by season 1. So
that's beautiful. So I have my next 3 movies picked. I know what they're going to be. And I'm going to give you this one first. And it's from 1979. And it's called Breaking Away.
Oh, boy. All right. I haven't seen that in a hot minute.
Get a little bit of Jackie Earle Haley, a little bit of early Dennis Quaid, a little bit of early Daniel Stern. About a small town and trying to escape its orbit.
Yep. That also got Oscar nominated film, right?
I'm interested to see what you think about it.
God, I probably haven't seen it since the 80s. So.
Yeah. Well, I have. All right, man. So I guess I'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Yes.
All right. Till then, Marty. Later.
Bye. Support the show on Buzzsprout for only $3 a month. Give us a 5-star review on Spotify or the platform of your choice. And be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube page.